Every country on Earth is in debt. The United States owes over $38 trillion, the highest amount in its history. The European Union carries around $14 trillion, and Japan nearly $9 trillion. Even wealthy nations like Saudi Arabia, or export giants such as Germany and China, owe massive sums of money. But here's the question. If everyone owes money, who exactly is owed? Welcome to Financial Empire, where we explore how money, power, and history are connected, and why nothing in economics is ever as simple as it looks. Debt isn't just a burden, it's the foundation of the modern financial system. Every war, every crisis, every boom and collapse sits on top of this invisible structure built from promises to pay. If you follow those promises long enough, you'll discover something surprising. The world doesn't owe money to anyone in particular. It owes it to itself. But that doesn't mean everyone benefits equally. To understand how we reach this point, a planet carrying over $315 trillion in total debt, almost 3 times larger than the global economy, we need to go back to where it all began. Centuries before credit cards or digital banking existed, the idea of national debt was born, not on Wall Street, but on the battlefield. In 1694, England was fighting a costly war with France and running out of gold. The king turned to wealthy merchants for help. In exchange for a steady stream of interest payments guaranteed by future taxes, they agreed to finance the crown. To manage this system, the Bank of England was created. It was revolutionary. The state could now spend money it didn't yet have, and lenders received something valuable in return, a promise from the government. That promise could be traded, bought, or sold. This was the birth of the government bond, the seed of the modern financial world. Other nations quickly followed. France copied the idea. The Netherlands improved it, and later the newly independent United States used it to fund its own revolution and expansion. Debt became not a sign of weakness, but a measure of credibility. The ability to borrow became the ability to lead. Empires that once conquered land for gold began issuing bonds for interest. The battlefield turned into the balance sheet. Fast forward 3 centuries, and debt has become the world's most traded product. The United States owes $38 trillion. Japan owes over $9 trillion. And global borrowing rises by roughly $1 trillion every 100 days. Every nation borrows, every bank lends, and every citizen, through taxes, savings, and pensions, is both a debtor and a creditor. But who holds the other end of the rope? Let's begin with the United States, because its debt is not just national, it's global. Out of that $38 trillion, about half is publicly held, meaning it's owed to investors rather than other parts of the government. Around 2/3 of those investors are American. Banks, pension funds, mutual funds, insurance companies, and the Federal Reserve. The remaining third, about $9 trillion, is held by foreign investors. Japan holds roughly $1 trillion. China, about $800 billion, followed by the UK, Luxembourg, and Belgium. So when people say the US owes money to China, it's true, but it's only about 2% of the total. Most of the debt America owes is to itself. The Treasury issues bonds. Banks and funds buy them. The Federal Reserve often buys them back, creating new dollars in the process. Americans pay taxes. Those taxes fund the interest on bonds, and that money goes back into American savings and pensions. It's a circular system. Real debt, but mostly owed within the same economy. And this circular system isn't just American, it's global. Japan lends to the U.S. through Treasury bonds. The U.S. lends to Europe through the IMF. Europe lends to developing nations through the World Bank. And developing nations lend back by investing their reserves in Western bonds. It's a worldwide network of mutual debt, a global loop of promises. Each country holds someone else's IOU. Each promise is backed by another promise. It's like a poker table where every player borrows chips from the next. The only rule keeping the game alive is that nobody stands up. Behind all this is a fourth and most powerful layer, the markets themselves. Hedge funds, pension funds, sovereign wealth funds, and central banks. These institutions manage tens of trillions of dollars. They decide which nations borrow cheaply and which pay high interest just to survive. When their confidence fades, currencies fall, governments collapse, and economies can be reshaped overnight. Democracy may decide who governs, but markets decide who survives. At the center of it all stands the modern central bank. Central banks don't just manage debt, they create it. Every time the Federal Reserve or the European Central Bank buys government bonds, it creates new money in exchange. The liability on one balance sheet becomes the asset of another. Every dollar in circulation represents a debt somewhere else. In fact, there's no such thing as debt-free money. Every coin, bill, or digital dollar carries an invisible IOU. For decades, this system has survived on confidence. As long as investors believe governments will pay the interest, even if not the principal, the machine keeps running. But when confidence breaks, the consequences can be severe. In Greece during 2010, government debt became unpayable. Bondholders panicked, interest rates soared. The European Central Bank and IMF stepped in, but their rescue came with painful austerity, tax hikes, budget cuts, and mass unemployment. In Argentina, repeated defaults turned debt into a national curse. In Sri Lanka, a lack of foreign currency led to shortages and political turmoil. When the system fails, the invisible creditors suddenly appear. The IMF, rating agencies, and anonymous investors who hold entire nations in their hands. Yet even after collapse, the cycle restarts. Old debts are replaced with new ones, and the global machine resets. That's because in today's economy, debt isn't designed to be repaid. It's designed to be refinanced. Governments rarely aim to pay off their debt completely. They continually issue new bonds to replace old ones, a process economists call refinancing. The interest becomes the true product, the rent paid for economic stability. The modern global economy depends on this process, just like a shark that must keep swimming to breathe. The United States will never fully pay off its $38 trillion debt. It will roll it over forever. Japan has done this for decades, with debt now exceeding 250% of its GDP. Yet its borrowing costs remain close to zero. Why? Because for investors, government debt is the safest asset in existence. U.S. Treasury bonds are not viewed as liabilities, but as foundations, used by banks, pension funds, and central banks as the base of the financial system. If Washington suddenly paid off all its debt, global markets would lose their most stable asset. The dollar supply would shrink, causing deflation and collapse. So instead, governments keep issuing debt rhythmically, turning it into the heartbeat of capitalism itself. When politicians talk about balancing the budget or paying off the national debt, it's mostly symbolic. The real goal is to keep debt sustainable, manageable, and believable, so that trust in the system never fades, because once confidence disappears, the entire illusion breaks down. Interest rates spike, credit dries up, and the world's financial engine stops. That's the secret of modern debt. It was never meant to be fully repaid, only to be believed in. As long as people trust the system, the numbers can keep growing. But that trust isn't shared equally. Interest payments don't flow evenly through society. They move upward, changing from taxpayers and workers to institutions and investors. Debt isn't just a transfer between countries, it's also a transfer between classes. That's why global inequality and global debt rise together. The system rewards those who own debt and burdens those who pay it. Creditors aren't villains. Debtors aren't victims. They are both essential parts of the same machine. But when that machine runs out of fuel, when new borrowing can't keep up with old promises, the question, who is the creditor, becomes personal. Because at the top of this global pyramid, there's no single face to blame. Not China, not Wall Street, not the IMF. It's all of them. And us. The modern financial world has turned debt itself into money. Governments issue it. Banks multiply it, investors trade it, and citizens rely on it. Debt once meant bondage. Today, it means balance. But if that balance ever fails, if confidence disappears, we'll be reminded what debt truly is, a promise that cannot last forever. If this gave you a new perspective, hit subscribe. History has the answers, and financial empire will show you where to look.